Hello, guys. It's marczicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, and we are live on the air. So hopefully some of you will be joining me, and we can talk and answer questions and all of that stuff. I just got back from the wonderful prop store where I was picking up two items that we'll be using in Space Command. One of which is a helmet from Pluto Nash. I have the rest of the space suit already from a different source, and then the other was this incredible heavy duty. Battle suit that we'll be turning into a heavy duty spacesuit. So that should be very, very fun. Now, as I've said before, we have a Kickstarter campaign going. It's not moving as briskly as I'd like. I really want to hit 30,000 by tomorrow at the latest. There's tons of great perks. And if there's a perk you want that you don't see, let me know. marczicree@gmail.com, and I will see what I can do to make that happen. So, hi, Jathan. I see you there. And so, again, for those who know me, I've written for a million shows and well, it's Twilight Zone Companion and et cetera, et cetera. Happy to answer anything anyone wants to know. If you want to have a career in film and TV, I can also tell you how to do that and stuff like that. So, and if I have, let me see if I have a scissors anywhere. I don't think I do, because I could open up this box with a space helmet in it, but I don't seem to have a cutting implement within easy reach, and I don't want to, bother with all that stuff. So, but meantime, I can tell you everything that's going on. I mean, Space Command's moving along. We've got a 2-hour rough cut of Forgiveness, and we're scheduled to shoot. My lovely assistant Elaine has just given me a pair of scissors so I can open this up. I have not opened up this box yet, and I just picked it up at the prop store way out in the boonies today, and now I'm cutting it open, and we will see for ourselves, both you and I, for the first time ever, what's in this and how it looks and all that stuff. Now, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, see, here's the whole thing about Space Command and it being the totality of my career to date. I when I was a kid, as I've mentioned before, Star Trek Twilight Zone Outer Limits made me want to be a writer. Now, one thing I wasn't aware of was that, especially with Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, they were building a lot of stuff fresh, but they were also taking um, costumes, spacesuits, all sorts of things from other productions that had gone before them, such as Forbidden Planet. In fact, one alien that was made for a an Outer Limits episode was actually reused in the pilot of Star Trek, The Cage. So I knew that you could utilize a lot of great stuff that have barely been noticed in other science fiction movies. Wow, this is super cool. Look at this. Wowie. Wowie, wowie, wowie. This is a space helmet from the Eddie Murphy flop, Pluto Nash. And it is incredibly cool. Incredibly cool. Let me see if I can put it on. That will be very fun. Oh, wow. I think, I see how this works. You have to unlock it. We'll have to do this later because it has a lot of bits and pieces, but it is incredibly cool. And you can see, I mean, here's the thing about big budget science fiction movies and TV shows. They spend millions of dollars making these things, and then they just aren't ever used again. And I strongly object to that on principle. And so for the Space Command, what we try to do, I think, is we try to acquire as much of this stuff as we can and reutilize it and redress it, change it. Let's see. Jason says, I'm trying to work on a novel about the beginning of space travel and the path toward a new future for the human race. Cool. That's cool. Do that. Yes, absolutely. Here's the breathing hose. Interesting enough, I have the backpack and the spacesuit, but the backpack, this goes right into that backpack. So it's going to be reuniting these pieces that were made to go together that have not been together since the movie was made some 20 odd years ago. But really fun, really fun. So, okay, cool. So, but yes, I mean, the main thing about writing novels is you want to get feedback from professionals, and particularly ones with less hair problems than I have. And so the Clarion Writers Workshop, I'm looking to see if I have any of the Clarion books here. It's the top science fiction writing workshop in the country. It will speed your learning curve enormously, and it also most of the major science fiction writers of the last 30, 40 years have come out of Clarion, and including me. And it's really, if you want a career as a science fiction novelist, that's absolutely the way to go. So, but meantime, I'm happy to answer questions for anyone who's here, anyone who's on this live stream with me. I'm happy to talk about anything interesting to all of us. The fun part about science fiction, of course, is that you can write stuff that lasts. Some of it comes true, and then it's outdated, like man landing for the first time on the moon. But we still haven't got faster than light drive. We haven't got bases on the moon and Mars. I mean, so a lot of what was being speculated in the 50s is still science fiction, is still futuristic. There's Mark Lungo. Twilight Zone used a spaceship built for the Outer Limits episode Specimen Unknown in Probe 7 over and out. Yeah, cool. Absolutely. And a lot of cross-fertilization. And I actually have the spacesuit and helmet that was made for Men into Space by CBS in 1959. And in fact, let's see, is this well, somewhere here I have a Men in Space lunchbox. I'll have to keep an eye out for it. It's around here on one of these shelves. But Men in Space, they made a whole bunch of spacesuits that was set on the moon, and then Twilight Zone used those spacesuits. Outer Limits used those spacesuits, and now I've got one of the original ones, and we'll use it in Space Command one way or t'other. So, but this is how it all works. It's so foolishly wasteful to not use these wonderful things again, because they just kind of vanish. And so I'm happy to have 3 sound stages where I can fill it up with all the cool stuff that I love and build new stuff as well. And we're rigging up now all of the spacesuit, all the spaceship consoles, getting them all lighting with the blinking lights and all of that stuff. If anyone knows where I can get spaceship, grid graphic screens and all that stuff, I'd love to get some of that stuff and have a variety of things that we can utilize. But let me know. We're gonna have a contest soon for screen design as soon as I can get to it. But meantime, our Kickstarter campaign is going on. If you can just throw a few bucks at it, that'd be hugely appreciated, because I want to get to 30,000 by tomorrow. We're at 27, almost 28,000. It's not that big a stretch to 30, but it will allow us to shoot on November 15th and get the creature stuff done and get that episode wrapped. And and Clarence Wiles says, I'm glad you're not using a green screen. I feel like I'm getting a look into your life. Yes, you are. This is the real me. Various people have said that my home seems like walking through my head, and that is true. Elaine is very forgiving. And though some things on the walls are her taste, but not this stuff. This is all me. And but it's just super fun to acquire these things and have them. And but of course the work is the most important thing, creating something original, something fresh that you can share with others. That's why I do all this stuff. But what I try and do with the backgrounds, I try and change it up, swap it out fairly regularly, so that you see different book covers, different interesting items. Like for instance this very cool Buck Rogers spaceship from the 30s. It's a toy, and Buck Houghton, who produced the Twilight Zone, we had a party here, and his wife saw this, and she said, I used to have one of these. It winds up. It was repurposed as other toys, but it winds up, and then you would it had a fin up here, and sparks would come out of the back, and she remembered that from when she was a girl in the 30s. So pretty cool. And there's many other things. This is a duplicate of a perfume vase from ancient Rome. It's really gorgeously sculpted, really lovely. So you can see it there. So pretty neat. And I mean, we can go through some of this other stuff as we continue our little journey here. But feel free to ask me questions about anything. Happy to answer them. And basically anything that I put my hand to, I can tell a story about, more or less. It's like, for instance, this button here. It says equal rights for replicants. And what this was is this was actually given out when Blade Runner came out. And it was an actual promotional item from the first release of Blade Runner in 1982. And it says copyright 1981, the Blade Runner Company, or the LAD Company. Blade Runner, copyright 1981, the LAD Company. So, and the movie came out in 82. So, just a little interesting item, and I got that when the movie came out. It was very interesting because when the movie came out, when I saw the first version of Blade Runner, I liked it a lot, and it got pretty negative reviews, and I thought, boy, they're missing it. Let's see. Jatham says the one problem I have with most sci-fi novels is the author basically just drops you into a world and a universe the reader knows nothing about. I would prefer to start out with an introduction. You can, uh, but either way can work. What you don't want to have happen is have this lengthy introduction about how the world works before people have gotten connected to the characters or connected to that world. In TV, we talk about two different kinds of pilots: the origin story or the typical episode, and either will work. The origin story is usually used with like superhero shows, things like that, where it's like, oh my God, they fell in the vat of chemicals and now they can, vibrate through walls or whatever, But like the original Star Trek pilots, uh, they were just typical episodes. They drop you on the deep end, and you have to figure out what transporters are and warp drive and all that stuff. And that worked just fine because it was so luxurious. It was so unlike any other TV pilot that had been done, and it really really worked. So let's see. Short story that gives the reader a way of understanding what's going on. Story short of yeah. Is that a dog I hear barking in the background? Yes, we had two dogs, and then Rudy ran away a couple months ago from the dog sitter, and we are still looking for him. This is his sister Eve that you're hearing in the background, and she misses her brother, as do we. So hopefully there'll be a miracle, and we'll find the little guy sometime. But if you go on my Facebook page, I've been posting about that, and you never know what'll turn up. He's microchipped, so if someone takes him to the vet, hopefully they would find out who he belongs to. Let's see. Jatham says, I'd already thought about it being a very short section at the beginning, no more than 5 to 6 pages long. Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of science fiction movies have a crawl at the beginning, including Blade Runner, that kind of explains where we are and what this is, and that's okay as long as it isn't overdone. You know. And Mark Lungo says, I hope we find Rudy. Yes, I hope so too. And thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And it's an interesting journey of this life because you know we. I've tried throughout my entire lifetime to maintain compassion, to maintain connection. Things can happen and they can be tragic or surprising, but you find the way to maintain as much equilibrium as you can within all of the challenges. I mean, for instance, this Kickstarter campaign we're doing right now, it's stressful because it's like if we hit 60 grand, we're able to roll camera, finish the 2 days of shooting with a creature, and move on to, Great Solar War, which we're writing the production draft of now. But if we don't make the campaign work, then we have to pull the plug on the shoot, and I don't want to do that. So remember again, guys, that we have the Kickstarter campaign. You can get all sorts of cool items. If you pledge 500 or $1,000, you help us a lot, and we put it entirely into the show. Or if you buy Space Command shares, that amount can be put toward the campaign too. So you'll get not only a percentage of my producers' net profits, but also you can get like $7,500 worth of perks. Pretty good deal. And so just contact me at marczicree@gmail.com. The interesting thing is that we have now met with two distributors, both of whom want Space Command, and that's terrific. And we just got the contract from the company we're going to go with. The basic cool part is that they want to release the first 2 hours as a standalone movie, so they're going to take it to Cannes in about 6 months and sell it worldwide. But the other company wants the entire season when it's done. So we can probably just segue from one right to the other company. So it's really exciting, very very exciting, and they've got all the relationships with Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, etc. So as Rush Limbaugh would say, when you're reading or listening to radio, it's the wordsmith that paints the picture in your mind. It's true, it's true. And I mean, I don't think he's saying much now, of course, not to be too black humor about it, but yes, I've always loved radio. I've loved radio drama, and radio comedy. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the medium it worked best in was radio. They've never made a Hitchhiker's Guide movie that was any good. Um, let's see. What got me really into that kind of storyline start was the movie Ultraviolet. Yeah. And again, you just what you want to avoid. I mean, it went out of hand in the 1950s when they would start with like 5 or 10 minutes of stock footage of V2 rockets going up, and scientists doing things that were non-specific, and it was all just to pad the movie so it would reach a feature length. But still, but right now things are very very exciting. So just to give you an overview, It's really cool. Last week would have been my mom's 100th birthday. I just released my new memoir, Love Gloria, which is about my mom and me growing up, and it's really, I'm very proud of it. And Ray Bradbury was my mentor when I was undertaking it, and then with Space Command, we finished the first 6 hours of shooting. Got it. Just have 2 more days of creature shoots on Forgiveness. We're already in post production, generating visual effect shots for that. Yeah, Elio. Sorry I can't stay. It's 1:14 a.m. here, and I must go to sleep. Once again, thank you for your time, Mr. Sci-Fi. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And don't forget to check out our Kickstarter campaign when you have a chance, when the sun comes up. But we're getting all the consoles up and running, so you can plug them in. The spaceship consoles, the Thunderbird console looks spectacular. There's these big throttles and these lights go on, and all these switches light up. It's gorgeous, and because we have items from Armageddon and the live-action Thunderbirds movie, and Ender's Game, and Cloverfield Paradox, and Twilight Zone, and Outer Limits, and on and on and on. Forbidden Planet. I mean, it just keeps going. Space Patrol. What else? I mean, I've typed up the list recently, and it just keeps going. Both movies and TV shows you've heard of and not heard of, but. We have spacesuits that have been worn by everyone from Eddie Murphy to Benedict Cumberbatch to you name it. I mean, it's we have one from Red Planet, which supposedly the two actors wouldn't even be in the same on the same screen together, so they had to put them in optically so they would look to be in a two-shot. So pretty amazing. But meantime, and then the alien spaceship is still on our stage 3 on our standing set. We're gonna have a holiday party between Christmas and New Year's, like we did last year, where we'll invite our friends and supporters and investors in to come and see our place and see all the cool spaceship sets and all that stuff. It's going to be really neat. And so in the meantime, let's see if there's anything interesting here I can show you guys. Yeah, well, this is interesting. This is when 2001: A Space Odyssey came out. They had a lot of different publications with articles about it, and this one is Popular Science, and it was Astronaut Adrift in Space, Exciting Adventure from 2001: A Space Odyssey. So that's a pretty cool little illustration, if you notice. And they got I mean, the funny part is, obviously they'd seen photos of the space helmets and the spacesuits, but of course the spacesuits are silver with I guess blue helmets, is it? And then the yellow one was all yellow. So it's close, but it's still not bad. And I've had that ever since the movie came out. See, so one of the things that's good as you get older is you actually have all these memories and all these experiences of pivotal moments, and it's very fun in that way. I mean, it's interesting between the difference between knowing of an event and living through an event. Very, very different. So, for instance, to me, World War II is like I've seen it in documentaries, but my mom, of course, lived through it. So, do the Space Command characters ever realize that, hey, we all share names with prominent 20th century science fiction authors? The only one who's going to be aware of that is Captain Bob Heinlein, who's a clone of the grizzled space jockey, and he'll be aware that he was named after Robert Heinlein. But I think the rest will just let that slide on by, because again, the point was not to have them be self-aware of that and like winking at the audience. It was simply that if you hear the names Le Guin and Simak and so forth, and you come to know that these are science fiction writers from the 50s, maybe meeting them in Space Command leads you to reading their works, checking out their works. For instance, when Harlan Ellison wrote City on the Edge of Forever, that gave me the impetus to start buying and reading his books. And so I want to kind of encourage people to read some of these wonderful writers, many of whom are sort of fading into obscurity. So let's see. Yeah, don't forget to put the link with each of your posts for the Kickstarter. Yeah, so just below this video, there should be a link to the Kickstarter campaign. And again, if we can hit 30,000 by today or tomorrow, that would be wonderful. And that's only about $2,000. And and we have such great items. We have walk-on rolls and producer credits and little miniature figures of me, and you can get a Paladin model. I mean, look at this thing. Who wouldn't want that? You can make your own sound effects. So there we go. And so yeah, and but meantime, we're really, really, really moving along. There's some conventions coming up, albeit some of them. I always have to balance between all of this. And Elena's on the mend. Elena had knee surgery, so she now has a robot knee, and she's not at full speed on it yet, but will be probably in the next month or so, and so that's great. And then beyond that, I'll show you some other cool stuff. Let's see what I have down here. Well, as you know, I'm a fan of like science fiction paperback covers, and this is a particularly ridiculous one. The Princess of the Atom by Ray Cummings. Look at that. That's just terrific, wonderful. And this is something I got when I was in London. It's I think from the 50s probably, and the magical amazing robot. And I recently found out that this game actually was originally a German toy, and then it was re-released in Britain as well. So very fun, very fun. And it's like people have always been fascinated with robots and spaceships and all of that. So that's really cool. So let's see, are there any more comments? I'm just looking because I want to answer everybody who's around. Not yet, but feel free to ask questions. Feel free to find out what I know, because it just keeps going. This was another Blade Runner button that came out when the movie came out. It's pretty nice. Little sepia thing of Deckard. Really, really cool. They just auctioned off Deckard's shirt. I think, was it his whole outfit or just his shirt? It was shirt and pants, and after the fight scene at the end, and it went for like something like $500,000, something crazy. And Jesus, that wasn't going to be going home with me, I'll tell you. But meantime, I'm about to do a Mr. Sci-Fi on the old Space Patrol TV show from the 50s. I think that's going to be very, very fun. So I've got all these Space Patrol items here, including this, which was a Space Patrol insignia. And the fun part of this is in Space Command, we use it as a little clicker. So, Captain Camera clicks it and turns on a video. And that's really fun to use this as a little in-joke and a tip of the hat. So let me see what else we have here. I have this badge that says "Immigration built this nation," which because we're all immigrants. Even the Indians, came from somewhere else to here. So it's a long, long ago. Let's see what else. Mark Lungo says, speaking of Harlan Ellison, what do you think of Spider Kiss? P.S. My best to Elaine. I read that a long, long time ago, so I don't really remember it well. But keep ice on that knee. You bet she is. Absolutely, yes. And but Harlan. What's interesting because Harlan wrote these novels in the 50s that had really lurid titles like Rockabilly, and as soon as he got could republish them, he'd republish them under other titles. So Web of the City was one of them. Spider Kiss was another, and I can't remember. Rockabilly, I think, was Spider Kiss initially, and Web of the City, I think, was Rumble. And I've got all of those editions because I collect Harlan's first editions and got them signed when he was still with us. But it's really fun to just sort of see. I mean, like here's a book by Frank Herbert before he wrote Dune, 21st Century Sub. Now this often what they would do, by the way, in paperbacks in the 50s is the title, the author's original title would be on the hardcover, which was meant to get reviews and so forth. And then they would put a more lurid title to try and catch the eye and get people to buy it. So the original title of this novel in the hardcover was The Dragon in the Sea, which is cool. It's about a futuristic submarine. But then they, 21st Century Sub. And then in little parentheses, it says The Dragon in the Sea. But this is a paperback. When I was a kid, my mom had a friend named Joe Katzenbarger, really nice guy. And we would go to see slideshows of his trips around the world and so forth. And he had a shelf with science fiction paperbacks. And I was like maybe 7, 8 years old. And I coveted this book. I was always hoping he would like say, well, why don't you just take that one home? Never did. Never did. Thank you, eBay. One thing that's great about eBay, among many things that are great about eBay, is that before eBay, you would have a list of things you wanted to find and collect and own. And it was murder. You could go decades and never find one. And eBay, it's just click of a button. And, for instance, the HAL 9000.
My mission responsibilities range over the entire operation of the ship, so I am constantly occupied. I am putting myself to the fullest possible use, which is all I think that any conscious entity can ever hope to do.
This is the Hallmark Christmas ornament. Perfect. Now, one thing I should say, which is very interesting, is it sounds like Douglas Rain, but it isn't. Clearly, they didn't want to pay for the rights to his voice, so it's a sound alike. So so yeah. And so let's see. Do we want to pull more things out? What can we? Well, if you've never seen a Rondo Award, this is one I won. There we go. Rondo Hatton was a very famous actor from the 40s who had acromegaly, so it distorted his features. He played various villains in movies, and so one of the editors at USA Today decided to create his own award called the Rondo Award for kind of geekish, fanish stuff. And I won in 2010 for producing the Twilight Zone Blu-ray set. So I won Monster Kid of the Year. And there are people who covet this. I think it's a really ugly thing. I tried at one point to get it gold plated, but they said because it's not, it was they were worried it would melt or etc. something. So and now I don't gold plate it because it's do I really want to ruin the Rondo Award? I don't know. So it's a it's a hard thing sometimes, but yeah. So let's see. Any other questions, guys? I mean, we can it's I can absolutely tell you stories I've never told anyone. I recently got this, by the way. This is an unlicensed Roy Batty doll, which is pretty great. And I found it at Monsterpalooza, and I just thought it was really cool. So brought it home. The problem though is it's too tall for the shelf, so I have to put it up higher and bend his little legs in a very unlike Roy Batty way. So that is the story there. There, there we go, Roy Batty. He may fall on us in a moment, because he's just up there. But anything else you guys would like to know? Have you read any independent? I'm sure there's another word in that sentence, so I will wait for it. Have I read any independent? Let's see. Let's scroll. Is it? Well, we'll wait for that. There we go. Have you read any independent? Keeping it authentic is the way to go. Well, yes. I guess we'll wait for Kazar's full question. Let's see, Mark Lungo. One more thing about Spider Kiss. It's arch, but not hopeless, and it's well worth a reread if and when you ever get any spare time. Great. Have you read any independently published authors, for examples like B.V. Larson or Rick Brown? If so, who are some you have read and liked? I haven't gotten around to those guys yet. I did read The Martian and liked that quite a lot. I wish I'd read it before it was picked up by a major publisher because then I could have been one of the cool kids. By the way, I'm thinking of launching a club called either Space Command Cool Kids or Mr. Sci-Fi Cool Kids, and put out T-shirts say I'm a Space Command Cool Kid. And so let me know if you guys would prefer Mr. Sci-Fi Cool Kid Club or Space Command Cool Kid Club. But I'm really glad that people can self-publish nowadays, and it's legit because it used to be called vanity publishing, and it wouldn't get reviews, and it wasn't treated seriously. It was just like, oh, okay, somebody's got a little money to spend and can self-publish, and so I'm really glad that people can get past the gatekeepers in an effective way now. And it's interesting because I'm putting out the memoir about my mom on Amazon. It was basically self-publishing, simply because I kept running afoul of these agents who would want major rewrites, and I didn't want to do major rewrites. So Neil Gaiman read it and loved it. Why on earth should I rewrite a book that Neil Gaiman loved, or that I love for that matter? And and I think so. So it never really got submitted to the editors in a way where it really had its shot. But I can't, you can't blind submit and hope for anything to go well. So sadly. But that was the story with that. It's the only book I've never sold to a major publisher. The Magic Time books were published by HarperCollins. Twilight Zone Companion was Bantam Books, and so forth. So, but let's see. Any other questions, Erg? Yeah. Well, we can keep going. I don't know if you're enjoying me sharing these odds and ends from my collection, but I'm happy to do so. Let's see what else is interesting. Well, this is fun. Many of you know I developed Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. And they had an event years later where Joe Straczynski and Michael Reeves and I and the star of Captain Power came and did a signing when they released the Captain Power box set, which I'm on. And they gave out these, which are the Captain Power logos. And so I have this here, and it's pretty cool looking. It's and of course that led directly to Babylon 5, as I've talked about before. And I love the connective tissue of science fiction, where one thing, like for instance, Star Trek leads to Next Gen, leads to, or so forth. Or you could say Ron Moore working on Star Trek Next Generation leads to him, being, hired to do Battlestar Galactica, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's, all of these ways that we all connect up, and we all know each other, of course. So that's very, very fun. So any other questions, guys? I'm happy to answer anything anyone wants to know. But please do go to the Kickstarter campaign. Please, throw some dollars our way, and also, if you want to buy Space Command shares, we now have a distributor, and we're going through the contract now. So, when the show is up and running, we will not be selling shares. So this is your opportunity, and I'm sure that when Space Command is, everywhere you turn, you'll say, "Dang, I should have bought some of those shares." I could be flying in my private jet now. Anyway, but just a word to the wise, guys. $7,500, is not a fortune, but it's not chump change either. But I wanted, the reason I made it 7,500, by the way, just to let everyone know, is I wanted it to be significant enough so that I could actually finance Space Command, which I've done, and yet not so expensive that it would either ruin someone like their whole nest egg, or um, where regular folks couldn't buy in. I really want regular folks, and that is why I did it. So Mark Longo says, we know the anthology series like you like. Are there any you don't like? Yeah, most of them. Yeah, I mean, I've seen so many that were like half-assed and weak and badly produced. I could name names, but you guys probably know all the ones that I would mention. I haven't watched Guillermo's show yet, oddly, because it's got the title of the book we did together, but haven't checked that out yet. I've watched some episodes of Black Mirror, but I find the series in general so dark that I have a hard time watching it regularly. But I watched, I think, one or two episodes of Electric Dreams, and it was okay-ish. But it's very hard to do a brilliant anthology show. I think Black Mirror is brilliant, by the way, but I just don't, I get bummed out by it. But everything has to come together. You have to have great writing. You have to have, and also it has to be things you haven't seen a million times. That's the problem with a lot of what Star Trek's doing. It's like the new Star Trek series is like, oh really? Why did they choose that plot? It's like that's not very interesting. And then they have their all musical episode. Well, and I'm not going to diss it because I haven't seen it, and I make it a point not to have an opinion about something until I see it. But the point being that clearly they're saying, oh well, Buffy did an all musical episode. Let's do that. Blah blah blah. It's like, hmm, Star Trek once really had a point of view that was powerful. Anyway, be that as it may. Let's see what else. Yeah, so I'm still waiting for more questions, but thank you for asking. I appreciate it. Let's see what else is here that might be of interest. Well, here's this fun thing. This is I'm a big fan of the Alien spacesuit, so I actually did one with Jack Kemmer in it. So you can see Jack there, and so I took bits and pieces and just made my own original design that's different from the Alien spacesuit, and then put it up with all the other characters from Alien. This is what the figure looks like when it's not in a spacesuit, and you can actually get one of these figurines in a metallic color. It won't be in a spacesuit, but it's Jack Kemmer, and you can get a figure of me also. One of the sad things is that if the campaign doesn't succeed, anyone who ordered their Mr. Sci-Fi figurine or their Jack Kemmer figurine, we probably won't do it because we didn't. I mean, all the money goes back to everybody. It's all or nothing. So spread the word. Tell people if you got someone who you think can get us to 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000. That'd be nice. It'd be nice not to be a nail biter. So, what's my favorite obscure science fiction fun? Okay. Well, there obviously Journey into Space, which I just put up on Mr. Sci-Fi. I love that. It's a British radio show that I think is terrific. I'm a big Robinson Crusoe on Mars is a film I love since I was a kid. Seven Faces of Dr. Lao, which is fantasy, but it's still wonderful. It's written by Charles Beaumont. Script. Charles Finney wrote the book. Science fiction film. Well, okay, let's see. Well, I mentioned Robinson Crusoe on Mars, Journey to the Beginning of Time. The Carl Sagan film is really great. What else do I love? I love so many things. It's The Abyss. If you have to watch the director's cut, but it's great for those who don't know. And I'm going to do a Mr. Sci-Fi soon about 3 or 4 movies that you have to watch the director's cut. You must not watch the theatrical cut because they're totally different movies. So that's true of Blade Runner. That's true of The Abyss. It's true of Dark City, which is a terrific film, but only in the director's cut, radically different from the release version. So as you know, but Dark City I would recommend highly. What else do I love? I mean, there's just so much. I mean, it's all the way from the George Pal films, to Harryhausen. I love Day of the Earth Stood Still, the original one. I love Night of the Comet was a fun film. It's just kind of there's there was what was it called? In the There was a recent film about a radio station in the 50s. It was very inventive, very clever, and I liked that. One of the fun parts about having um, my own channel is that I can recommend things and I can review movies that I've seen that I really liked. We just watched X last night, which is a horror film, and it was really good. It's dark and often, Elaine's no fan of horror. The only horror films we really love are things. The Thing is a movie we love, but generally we stay away from horror. But even though I story edited Friday the 13th, the series, but X was very, very interesting in that, and Mia Goth, who plays 2 roles, very, very, very effectively. She's going to be in Guillermo's Frankenstein movies along with Oscar Isaacs, and we'll see how that goes. He's been wanting to make Frankenstein for decades. Of course, wanted Doug Jones to play the monster, and now it'll be Oscar Isaac. Sadly, I would have loved to have seen what Doug would have done with that incredible character. I think he might have been able to get the pathos that Karloff got. We'll see about Oscar Isaac. I'm gonna again withhold judgment, but I think if anyone saw Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein and saw De Niro doing the monster, it's like, oh, wrong choice. Don't do that. So unless you love that film, and then you can certainly have the right to. Harlan Ellison hated the term sci-fi. What do you think of it? I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I think you know, Harlan was an extremely pugnacious person, and it's sci-fi is a joke. That's all it is. Here's the lineage of all of this. Modern science fiction, you can argue that Frankenstein might have been the first science fiction novel, or there's even an ancient Roman guy or something that wrote some damn thing. But in reality, modern science fiction really started with Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. And I much prefer H.G. Wells for a number of reasons. But back then, they didn't have the term science fiction in the 1890s, so they called them scientific romances. And it wasn't like romance like Boy Meets Girl, it was like a romantic notion, a whimsical or fantastical notion. But that was a little bit ungainly as a term, so, scientific romance. And so then Hugo Gernsback, who published a number of magazines, he came out with amazing stories, and so he came up with the term scientifiction. And by the way, he's the guy that the Hugo Awards are named after, scientifiction. And that was a little awkward, scientifiction. I mean, he was trying to combine scientific and fiction into one word, scientifiction, but ultimately, very quickly, in fact, just within a few years, it was then shortened to science fiction. And for several decades, that was the term, science fiction. And it worked and worked perfectly well. but Forrest J. Ackerman, the editor of both Famous Monsters of Filmland and Spaceman magazine, and I have copies of that up there beyond my reach at the moment. Uh, he loved puns, and when hi-fi came out, he thought it'd be very fun to call science fiction sci-fi, and that stuck. Now Harlan Ellison, now back though, when you get to the '60s, Harlan didn't want to be. See, here's the problem. Um, Science fiction was ghettoized. There was a period for decades where science fiction writers might earn $1,000 for a novel, maybe 3,000 if the going was good, but they couldn't punch through to the mainstream and mainstream money because it was really more about money than anything else. Science fiction writers wanted to earn like mainstream writers did. This is in the day where Saturday Evening Post and Playboy were publishing uh, really high end fiction. and paying extremely well for it. Ray Bradbury was able to punch through, and Heinlein, oddly enough, was able to punch through. But many of the writers had a very hard time, and they were writing either for low-paying science fiction magazines like Galaxy. And let's see, which one do we have here? Or Astounding. There's Astounding. Or they were selling to like sort of grade B, softcore magazines that would then publish short stories, but mainly as padding filler for the photos of new girls. And so Harlan, so in the '60s, as science fiction writers were starting to bridge out and not just write about scientific things but social ideas, they came up with the term speculative fiction, and but it really still, even to this day, hasn't stuck the way science fiction has, or sci-fi. I'm fine with sci-fi. I like it. Otherwise, I wouldn't call myself Mr. Sci-Fi. Forrest Ackerman, whom I knew, was the first Mr. Sci-Fi, and he coined the term. So I named myself Mr. Sci-Fi, again, as a tip of the hat to Forey, who was one of the great guys. So Mark Lungo, let's see, Harlan, I'll say, yeah, why do I prefer Wells over Verne? Okay, uh, here's why. Because I think he's a better storyteller. Like a lot of the Verne novels I've read, like Journey to the Center of the Earth and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, are almost like travelogues. There's not a lot of drama. I mean, it's sort of like these, Nemo sinks the ship, and the professor and various people come aboard the Nautilus, and they sort of travel around, and they get to see what the ocean's like, and it's really an amazing book, particularly for the time, the 1860s when it came out. But it's kind of like, here's this and here's that, and let's go look over there. And it's like, okay, fine. But Wells had a completely different objective. He's very dark as a writer, and basically his idea was to say, if things go like this, it's going to go very badly. And amazingly, just in a matter of very few years, he came up with the first classic alien invasion novel. There were other ones before him, but this was the one that really became a classic. It's a major novel, War of the Worlds, phenomenal. Okay, and that was like, well, what if an alien race, invaded us like colonial powers on Earth were invading the more primitive cultures, and he wanted to posit that, the idea that we would be at war with something that we could not beat, and only the diseases beat the Martians. So very interesting. Then the Invisible Man, which is like, okay, it's what if you could turn invisible, but of course you lose your mind and you go out, everything goes awry. Island of Dr. Moreau was very much about, okay, vivisection and creating beast men, and trying to tame the wildness out of them, and then it comes back to bite you literally. Phenomenal book, very dark. And then my favorite, The Time Machine, in which you have the Eloi and the Morlocks as two branches of humanity split off, and it's just a terrific adventure story. Just real. I mean, like, I love The Lost World by Conan Doyle. It's a great book, but I really love adventure stories that are well told. She by H. Rider Haggard is terrific. Lost World by Conan Doyle. Time Machine. If you want to read three great adventure stories, and then you might want to throw in Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, and then you've got like four really entertaining books. So there you go. So let's see. Waves of Mutilation. Heinlein is a terrible writer. I never understood his popularity. Here's the thing about Heinlein. He's very limited and he's very dated, but there are certain of his juveniles that I think really still are very fun. One of my favorite books is Half Spacesuit Will Travel, and it's just a wonderful adventure, and it's got a wonderful narrator, and it's got a wonderful side character in the character of Pee Wee, this little girl that he befriends, and I recommend it. If you haven't ever read that one, it's really worth reading. It's totally entertaining. Zork Player, hi man, how are you? Yes, I'm great. I've only read The Invisible Man by Wells, but I was surprised by how bleak it was. Yes, and so that's true. But if you've never read The Time Machine or War of the Worlds, those are two great books. They really hold up. They work like a charm. He's a phenomenal writer. He's incredibly talented, and it was very sad that as the 1890s merged into the 20th century, he started writing more broadly. He sort of became this very famous English writer, and he would write books about just everyday life, and he'd write books commenting on the world at large, and he became um, less interesting as a writer, I think. But though my things to come, the movie that he wrote that came out in the 30s is again one of my favorite movies. What do I think about David Lynch? I like David Lynch. In fact, I I just bought a book on the making of his version of Dune, and also on Mr. Sci-Fi, I came upon a fan edit that put everything back in to David Lynch's Dune, and it is a much better movie with everything put back in. And I highly recommend it. If you look up the Spice Diver fan edit of Dune, particularly in 4K, because it's now up on YouTube in 4K, you will be very well rewarded. There are many things in David Lynch's Dune that I prefer to the more recent one. I think many of the roles are cast with much more distinctive actors. Freddie Jones is terrific in Dune, in David Lynch's Dune. Many of the actors are, and I think one should revisit that film. But again, watch the full cut. It's not the director's cut, but it's closer to what Lynch intended. And I like some of his other films. For me, David Lynch is very hit and miss. Um, He's not one of my favorites generally, but he has an astonishing visual sense, and that also in the original Dune. Another thing that was great about David Lynch's Dune was that there was this aesthetic that you see in Star Wars and Alien, the used universe kind of thing that came off Star Trek, and being squeaky clean. It was there's a lot of things that are like a response to Star Trek, but that then became the cliche, the sort of used the science fictiony look, and David Lynch came up with sort of a very interesting Baroque look, this wood, dark woods, and all that stuff, and it looked really different, and that was really brilliant. And so it's worth looking at again. Any opinions on Jack Finney? Invasion of the Body Snatchers is terrific. He was a pal of Beaumont and Matheson and all those guys. He's a good writer and a talented writer. But again, for me, some of his work I like more than others. He wrote Time After Time, which is it's okay, but it's kind of dated now. And for me, he gets so much into the minutia of the past. Um, you know, um, that he gets. For me, the story is subsumed just by him getting what it's like a travelogue of that era that he travels to. But Matheson, had a Professor Finney, I think it's Somewhere in Time, which was a tip of the hat to Jack Finney. But I don't think he's related to Charles Finney, who wrote Doctor Circus of Doctor Lao. Waves of Mutilation says, I find people who dislike Lynch difficult to take seriously. Well, he's a very acquired taste. I liked Blue Velvet a lot. I think there are certain directors who have a unique vision, and that can be Hitchcock, that can be David Lynch, that can be any number of directors, and that's what really separates the average kind of journeyman director from the real geniuses, because the real geniuses, you can't have another director make that movie and have it be anything like the movie they made. And so so thank God for them. I mean, Scorsese, all of these wonderful directors. Spielberg I mean, he's huge, and he has his pluses and minuses as well. Uh, Eraserhead is a lot of fun. Yes, it's great, and that creature is great. I haven't ever looked into the specifics of how they did that, but it seems so alive, so real, and that's really cool. I mean, he's a phenomenal man. Though the one thing that most people don't notice, which I urge you to look at, is I remember David Lynch when Dune came out, his Dune. He was talking about, well, we had all these auditions, and we're looking for the hero and looking for someone who could really play this incredible hero, and finally we found the perfect guy. And when you look, basically the lead he cast as Paul Atreides looks like a heroic version of David Lynch. Same hair, same basic look, and that's really funny. That's really funny that he kind of cast an idealized version of himself. So very fun. Um, Let's see. Can we get a DVD of each of your videos? Well, of the Space Command ones, yes. We've just put out we were offering the box set. So if you go to our Kickstarter campaign, which there should be a little subject line down here, you can order the Blu-ray or DVD of the box set, which is the first 6 hours of Space Command, plus a prequel that's an animatic, and just all sorts of extras. It's really cool. Um, that's fun. That's fun. That's fun. So Mark Lungo and Wave of Mutilation are yeah. So but also another thing I'm going to put out eventually when I get to it, when I get the time, is I've been in fits and starts. I've been doing a history of science fiction novels, movies, TV shows, comic books, etc., and TV and radio. And eventually, I'm going to take those Mr. Sci-Fi videos that I've done and spiff them up, like put better visuals on it and so forth, and release that as a box set. Because you know, uh, I have a rather unique view of science fiction, the history of science fiction, partially because of all the people I've known who made the great era of science fiction, and so I want to put that out as a cohesive set where you don't have to go searching for it, and so that will be down the road, I think. But we have so many shows to make. I mean, between beyond Space Command, we have all 5 other series waiting in the wings, ready to go. So it's all about the money and the distribution and all that stuff. So please buy Space Command shares, go and pledge to the campaign. It's uh, success is better than failure, as I always say, and we're very close to being very successful, all of us. So, but I love having my channel. I love having you guys. Let's see if I can find something else to pull out here and talk about. Let me see what's fun. Okay, well, we were just talking about H.G. Wells. This is a novel he wrote that came out. This edition came out in the 30s. Great Art Deco cover, The Sea Lady, and it's about a mermaid. And he actually wrote it earlier than the 30s, but it's a Wells title you may not have heard of. I love cover art. It's something that really has always interested me and excited me because it sort of sells the book. I mean, look at this great cover, The Red Planet, Charles Chilton. This is the novelization of the second Journey into Space story where they land on the Red Planet on Mars, and you can just see how cool that is from the 50s. And see, the fun thing about science fiction design is that those designs from the 50s are still cool. Spacesuit designs I've always loved, and you can. I mean, this is Elon Musk's Starship, and it looks exactly like a spaceship from the 50s. And so I think that's great. I think it's great that well, here, I mean, this is the spaceship from When Worlds Collide. Look at, I mean, you know, not there's a lot of similarities here. Shiny silver spaceship, but so I really love science fiction design, which dovetails into real scientific design as well. So we got about another 6 minutes or so or 8 minutes, I guess. So if you have advice or questions, or you want to know about, who's the worst actor I ever worked with, not that I'll tell you, but yeah, I've been very lucky actually. Most of the actors I've worked with have been a dream, totally a dream, and very collaborative, very inventive. Want to do a great job. Do you think we'll ever see another Planet of the Apes? Yeah, I think they're working on one. So that's okay. I mean, I have a fondness for the original Planet of the Apes movies. They're kind of goofy and they're kind of corny, but you know. But if you haven't seen the graphic novel of Rod Serling's original screenplay for Planet of the Apes, I urge you to get it. It's different from the movies and really its own thing, and very much Rod Serling in style. So I recommend that. He was the first screenwriter hired on Planet of the Apes, and it's a very different vision. Um, let's see. Have I worked with Damon Lindelof on any projects? Not yet. We know each other. Whenever he emails me, he signs it "Your fan, Damon," which is sweet, nice. But we haven't collaborated, and but I'm not close to that option. I should reach out to him and explore that. On sci-fi writers commenting on reality, some of my favorite Ellison books are his books of criticism on television, An Edge in My Voice, Procrustean Bread. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was a wonderful essayist, and you wouldn't agree often with his opinions. I mean, like he did a book of movie reviews as well, and what he loved I didn't necessarily love, etc. But he'd always be very interesting to read, and he would have an angle of attack. So that's pretty neat. Dark Star remains my favorite sci-fi. Dark Star is a wonderful film, and as we were talking earlier about these classic science fiction TV shows or movies that spin off a lot of other stuff. Dark Star, I mean, think about it. There's these two guys in college, and they start shooting this little independent science fiction film while they're at USC. And one of them is the writer and star, and the other is the director. And it's John Carpenter and Dan O'Bannon. And so between the two of them, what would spin off from that collaboration would be Dark Star, which has a funny alien that gets on the loose because they had to expand the movie when it sold, and they did it by having an alien get loosed in the ship. And Dan O'Bannon thought, well, what if it were serious and not funny? And that led to Alien. And so just from those two guys making that science fiction movie together, you get Escape from New York, The Thing, all the John Carpenter movies, The Fog, Halloween. And with O'Bannon, you get Alien, and you get Total Recall, and you get so many amazing works. And then, my friend Greg Jean worked on that film. He built the spaceship, and the spaceship was a design that Ron Cobb just jotted down on a napkin. And that started Ron Cobb working in film. And Ron Cobb, of course, became one of the great designers of so many films. I mean, he did Alien, he did Total Recall that we just mentioned, he did the Abyss, on and on and on. Just one of the geniuses of science fiction design, and we have one of his designs in Space Command before his passing. So I met him when I was 16. I mean, again, it's so fun. I mean, when you talk about all of these people that have had this huge influence, it's like I've known most of them. I've been friends with most of them. I mean, I met Ron Cobb when I was 16. I met Greg Jean not long after, and I didn't meet O'Bannon, but Ray Bradbury, Harlan Ellison, all of these guys, or I may have met Dan O'Bannon in passing, but I met his widow, and I have a number of scripts that he wrote that were never made, and so I have actually been in communication with her to see if we want to make some of those because they're pretty cool. Um, yeah, John Carpenter's an amazing director. It's a shame he kind of petered out in recent decades because so it's interesting how some directors stay strong. Uh, like Scorsese, I think is still an amazing director. I think Ridley Scott. Let's see what he does with Napoleon. But John Carpenter kind of he had that brief period where he's making wonderful films. The Thing is my favorite of all of his films, and it's just superb, wonderful. Harlan Ellison, you're mentioning Harlan. Yeah, Harlan was one of a kind and hugely influential. Again, I really hope some of these writers last. Once they die, it's anyone's guess who's going to last 100 years, 200 years. I mean, Dickens lasted. So many writers who were popular in his era are forgotten now. Um, it's a shame to me that Theodore Sturgeon is less known than he used to be because he's a phenomenal writer and he was a very good friend and mentor. Let's see how are we doing. We have 3 more minutes, so if anyone has a final question, but again, please go pledge to the campaign because when I do these live streams and then the total doesn't budge, it's like, oh man, you know, because it's one thing to enjoy me, but it's another thing to support what I'm doing. And so even if it's $100, that helps. Every bit of it helps. And obviously 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. That's pretty cool, pretty fun. So yeah, the thing. Yeah. The Thing was originally Who Goes There, written by John W. Campbell, the editor of Astounding Magazine. I have the first edition of that book somewhere behind me, but I don't think it's out for view at the moment, but I can put it out for you later. But it's a great novella, and the first version of The Thing in the 50s was very, very good, just not as brilliant as John Carpenter's. And again, that's one of the situations where all the right things come together. The creature design, the acting ensemble, wonderful actors. There's no weak link there. And it just really holds up amazingly. Yeah, The Star Lost. Harlan was not happy with how that show came out, and I think I put on Mr. Sci-Fi. If you type in Harlan Ellison, I think I put on Mr. Sci-Fi a tape he did when Star Lost came out, and an interview that he did where he talks about how it went awry, and it's just fascinating. So Harlan was quite something. Quite something. I mean, it's funny because all the things we've been talking about, if you type these things in Mr. Sci-Fi search bar, you'll find me doing videos on all of these things at length. And so it's cool. Where do you go to pledge for the box set? Below this video and the recent ones on Mr. Sci-Fi, there's a link to the Kickstarter campaign, and you can go there and you can pledge for the box set. And I promise you, it is going to be really cool. Everything is canon. Everything we write for Space Command is all part of the main story, whether it's in a short story, a novel, a radio play, a graphic novel. All of it is builds on the whole story. So your time will be well spent. How often do I stream Mr. Sci-Fi? I'm doing it more during this campaign. I'll be streaming every few days, either at 6 p.m. my time or noon my time. So you just have to kind of follow me on social media, and you'll see when I announce it. But and then after that, I do it fairly irregularly, just because I'm so busy, making making stuff. But if there's something you want me to talk about, or a subject you'd like me to explore, or perk for the campaign that you'd like me to create. Though if I create a new perk for Space Command for the campaign, please buy it. Because it'd be like, oh, I'd love a Space Command uniform for my dog. Okay, but then, like, okay, we make the Space Command uniform, and then nobody buys it. It's like, oh no, what happened to that dog guy? So I'm glad you're having fun. Wave of Mutilation, and Mark Lungo. You should not assume that's not his real name. It could easily be Mr. Mutilation. Uh, so anyway, but if you keep an eye out during the next few weeks, we'll be having a number more of these live streams. But the more you pledge to the Kickstarter campaign, or buy Space Command shares, the more I'm incentivized to do this, and I enjoy it. But again, it's always saying, okay, we have to hit the number so we can shoot the show, so we can put out the show, so we can distribute the show, so we can make more shows, etc. And if you saw what we're planning with the creators of Farscape and The Expanse, and the new Rod Serling show, and all these things we have Wing the Wings, you would be saying, okay, where do I sign up to throw my bank account your way? Because this is going to be, Sci-Fi Channel was never what we wanted it to be. It was very, some shows were good, most were not good. The Showrunners Network, which I'm creating, there's not a bad the apple in the bunch. I mean, you're going to love all these shows. So that's about it for now. I think we've hit our hour mark. So it's lovely having all of you here. Tell your friends. Subscribe to Mr. Sci-Fi. We're almost at 100,000, which I very much want to hit. Getting closer, getting closer. But again, thanks for all of your support. Science fiction is easy to love, isn't it? There's so many great things in it and great people in it. So we'll talk to you soon. And thanks for everything, guys.